Lovely, thanks, Teresa. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breckland's Cabinet meeting on Monday, the 20th of September, 2021. It's 9:30. We will now commence the official part of the meeting. So move to item 1, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 26th of July, contained within pages 4 to 7. Our Cabinet colleagues happy they are a true and accurate record. Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies for absence, please, Teresa.
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies from councillors Banbridge, Hewitt and Sherwood this morning. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Item 3, any urgent business? I haven't got any. I'm not notified of any either from the MO or the head of paid service. So we'll move on to item 4, declarations of interest, to ask if any members have any declarations of interest they want to raise now, which aren't already declared in their register of interest. No, thank you. Item 5, non-members wishing to address the meeting. Good morning and welcome to you all. You are all most welcome. Hopefully there's some items you want to speak on later on throughout the morning. But it's really nice to see you all here today. Item 6, Chairman's announcements. I haven't got any pertinent to Breckland District, just to update members that you've seen there's a cabinet reshuffle which took place in the middle of last week. What does that mean for local government? You'll see that there's some rumours flying around the potential renaming of the department and what that means, a focus on levelling up and the emerging levelling up white paper, which is still to be seen in draft form. But for us, we are waiting with bated breath around the planning reform, around our levelling up bid we made for Thetford, and of course the budget review for the whole of the local government family. Between the Local Government Association, ELGA, the District Councils Network, we've been working tirelessly with the Secretary of State and the ministerial departments over the summer period to try and ensure that we were getting the best outcomes for local government. Of course, at any time when there is a change of personalities within a department, some of that work then pauses and some of that work can then change to where we then once thought. So between the officer team and the Cabinet, we'll be working hard with those agencies to ensure that we get an understanding of where the new Secretary of State and the ministerial team are wanting to take some of those items. And I hope that members will be patient in their forbearance over these coming weeks, but particularly around the budget position and the planning review. We don't know everything. Everything we thought we may have understood through rumour control, those conversations, absolutely now a pause whilst we get an understanding and intelligence to where the Secretary of State and the Minister is taking it. So please, if I could just ask for members' patience and of course the public's patience. As soon as we've heard anything which we're able to confirm, we will do that. And some of that will come to light later on in one of the items today. So move on to item 7, which is a standing item. I'd like to pass to Councillor Alison Webb, please, for Breckland Community Funding.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, today I'm pleased to say we've got 4 grants which will take the total given by us to £98,982, which is a massive amount, which has really benefited our local communities in Breckland. The first application we've got is £5,000 to GW Staniforth charity to carry out a range of improvements and repairs to King's House Gardens. GW Staniforth charity main role is to look after the King's House and its gardens. This is in Thetford. The gardens are freely open to the public every day. The £5,000 grant will be used to improve the paths and surfaces around the seats within the garden to improve accessibility. In addition, garden fixtures such as arbours, pergolas and a small section of garden wall is going to be repaired and restored. The work is relevant to Breckland's Council's Your Place priority as it will improve the quality of a key public space in the centre of town. There is also relevance to the health and well-being priority as the gardens provide an oasis of quiet within the centre of Thetford. Local nurseries also use the gardens as an outdoor space, and providing a safe environment will allow greater use of the gardens by groups of all ages. Cabinet member Mark Robinson and Breckland member Jane James has confirmed their support for this project. Breckland member Jane James has said, "The gardens present a wonderful oasis in the urban centre of Thetford, and the last 16 months has made people reevaluate their relationship with their outdoor spaces and appreciate and use them more. The garden improvements proposed will enable visitors of all ages and abilities to safely access the gardens and link well with the Breckland corporate priorities of your place and your health and well-being. She also says she does need to declare it as part of her role as Thetford Town Council and listed as a trustee of the charity. That's the first one. The second one is £2,722 to Naabra and Narford Community Centre to run a new digital support project. The Community Centre is planning a project that will provide digital support to anybody in the community who may need it. This may include older people, vulnerable adults, veterans and unemployed people. Support is going to be provided in a number of ways, in individual one-to-one sessions, remote support by assisting people informally while they are attending the centre. Again, the application is relevant to Breckland's Your Opportunity and Health and Wellbeing priorities. There's also a potential link with DWP, which means that job seekers will be able to receive IT support that may assist them with accessing employment opportunities. The support to older people will also help combat insulation. Breckland member Peter Wilkinson has confirmed his support for the project as follows. This application for funding has come from the way we, the population, have had to adjust to living and working in a different way, a legacy from COVID-19. The Naabra Community Centre is a central hub for the residents of Naabra, Narford and neighbouring communities. This community project will be sustainable and will support all age groups. It will allow for the lunch and breakfast clubs to be reinstated, also a new way of supporting residents digitally, especially now Breckland District Council are having to work more digitally in helping residents who are vulnerable, helping them to feel secure and safe due to COVID-19. I see this project supporting residents who do not have access to digital communication or who are digitally illiterate. Contacting Breckland District Council, contact customer service and support. The same applies for helping with connecting with Job Club and DWP. These officers, along with Breckland DC officers, are planning to go mobile, working with ward members and residents. What a benefit this facility at Naabra would be for agency joint working. The project would be sustainable going forward for generations of residents. The third one is £1,000 to Naabra Local History Society to construct a bird watching photography hide. Naabra Local History Society is a volunteer-run organisation that aims to preserve, provide access to and foster interest in the social and natural history of the area through displays of artefacts and models and arranging talks on Norfolk themes. The museum has now recently moved to new premises in Pentney Road and wished to convert a lean-to construction adjoining the museum to accommodate a bird-watching photography hide. The hide will overlook a large area of willows and other trees, bushes, water and reeds in a gully that was dug out in the 1840s, to obtain material for the railway embankment. The application is relevant to Breckland's health and wellbeing priority. It provides opportunities for local people to volunteer and to help organise the running of this facility, thus providing scope to add to their skills and providing opportunities to make friends and combat isolation. Breckland member Peter Wilkinson has confirmed his support for the application as follows. I am contacting you to offer my support for the Naabra History Society funding application. The group has worked tirelessly for the residents of not only Naabra, but for the benefit of all interested Breckland residents too. The facility they require funding for has been highlighted by visitors to the site for bird watching, also an area for completion, men's shed history meetings. The area borders the River Nar. The facility is much needed, so much more since the world pandemic, which has took life normality away from us all. The project will be sustainable and go hand in hand with Breckland District Council's climate strategy as the museum and the mill, and the project will be open for use by all local Breckland residents and schools. £3,439, this is the last one I believe, yes, to Weeting Village Hall to provide a new youth shelter. Weeting Village Hall is seeking funding to replace the youth shelter on the playing field. The current shelter is said to be old and shabby and in need of constant maintenance to keep it safe to use. The new shelter will be made from stainless steel and, as well as being vandal proof, will need minimal maintenance. It is guaranteed for 15 years. The application is relevant to Breckland's health and wellbeing priority, as it provides a space for young people to meet and socialise in a safe environment, particularly so as it is an outdoor space. Breckland member and leader Sam Chapman-Allen has confirmed his support for the application as follows. I very much welcome this application and the enhancement of youth provision in the community. Post-coronavirus has shown that we must ensure that all our young people have safe places and spaces in which they can come together in person. This village has an incredible community spirit and offer, and this will only enhance this further. That's the final one. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Alison. I've got Peter, Mark and Jane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to thank the Breckland Council and Alison Webb and the portfolio holder for funding. They're all great projects we've heard this morning, and not necessarily come through COVID, but they've enhanced that calling for these projects. And I'm really pleased that we've managed to find funding for it under these unprecedented times we're working and living at the moment. So thank you to everyone involved.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, I'd like to declare an interest in the first application that came forward, because like all members of Thetford Town Council, I'm a trustee of Staniforth Trust. So on that item, I'll abstain from voting, but I would like to pass comment on that particular item, if I may. I'm really pleased to see this application come forward. It is a hidden gem within the heart of the town, and more, as we all know very well, it's well versed the struggles that our retailers and our town centres have been struggling with. And more, I draw the conclusion that we need to give people reasons to enter our town centres and engage with them in different ways. Enhancing this particular location, which I can't emphasise enough, is an absolute gem. We're giving the residents of Thetford and the wider community a reason to do that. I'll just stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't add an awful lot, but I know it means an awful lot to the newly formed Friends of Staniforth Gardens if this grant is awarded, and it will build on their already existing fundraising endeavours. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Robert.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to add my support for the Weeting application. Weeting is a thriving community and is sort of self-sufficient in terms of providing facilities for the village, and this is a facility that is in need of renewal, and I think the use of stainless steel will be innovative as a youth shelter. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. So Alison, so £98,000 committed out of the 100,000 budget. So you've got a couple of residual £1,000 left. Be helpful if you could just explain to colleagues what's next and what work you and the team are doing to make any possible changes to the grant funding for next year. Because of course, I'm really pleased to see that you've committed again through the work you and your assistant director are doing to make sure we're allocating once again £100,000 to communities across the district to support activity and working in partnerships. It'd be helpful if you could just expand on that, please.
Of course, Leader. Yeah, okay. It's £98,982, so it's not far off the 100,000 which we actually allocated for. There is a bit left. It's 100, and yeah, it's not that much, but anyhow, what is left is going to be rolled over. We're looking at the Queen's Jubilee Fund for next year. Obviously, we're looking at how much we've got in the pot to actually make sure that we give us grants out to towns and villages to make sure that they've got sufficient funds to make celebrations of such a wonderful event coming up next year. So all that side of things is going to, at the end of the day, as I said, we have an amount of funding in the pot anyhow, which is going to help. It's not just this a bit, but it will make more of a larger pot to be able to make the Jubilee a success going forward. So that's the main thing. At the end of the day, though, Leader, I will say that if money is not used for the Jubilee, then it will be rolled into more community-led projects. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Alison. And I know that you and the team are working hard just to understand our previous commitment to the last financial year around VVJ Day celebrations, in which this council awarded thousands of pounds across the district, and some of those were delayed activities. And I know that lots of things have been happening over the last couple of months since COVID restrictions have lifted. And of course, if Councillor Sherwood was here, I'm sure that he would be plugging that they've had a really positive application rate for the green grants, which this council is offering to inspire communities, young people to think differently about how we protect and enhance our environment. So I look forward to Cabinet colleagues having the opportunity to see what's been forthcoming in there. So Alison's presented 4 items today. It's a delegated decision, but she's always looking for some support from Cabinet colleagues, mindful of Councillor Robinson's declaration of interest under 1 item, but a Cabinet colleague content. Alison, thank you very much indeed. So move on to item 11 then, which is local council tax reduction scheme for 22-23. Councillor Phil Cowan to present, please.
For the record, it's actually item 8, I believe, on the agenda, not number 11. So
Freudian slip, sorry, Phil, thank you.
it's quite all right.
What would I do without you?
For those out there who are wondering where we've leapt to, we're actually on item 8 of our agenda. Good morning, everyone. And once again, we're here to deal with our annual review of our local council tax reduction scheme. This is the 9th year in which this particular scheme has been running here in Breckland, and I'm delighted to welcome Adrian Mills, who's Head of Benefits at ALP, who's going to take us through the paper in some detail. There are various items for consideration under the recommendations on paragraph 1. And you will see there's a sort of common theme in those, and that is this, that we're looking always to make life easier for our residents, make their applications simpler, and be able to deal with their concerns and considerations as speedily as possible. There is an appendix 1 at the end of this report, which contains the various figures that have been used to drive these recommendations forward, and I'm sure Adrian will be able to answer any detailed questions that you have on those. So without further ado, Adrian, can I pass across to you with the leader's consent to prepare this, present this report for us? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cowan. Good morning, members. So officers have conducted a statutory annual review of the Council's local council tax support scheme for working age customers for the 2022-2023 year. It should be noted government set a national scheme for pensioners. Every local authority in the country must determine its own local council tax support for working age customers. Fundamentally, were members to decide to retain the existing scheme for the forthcoming financial year, that must be mandated by the 11th of March 2022. Were members to change the scheme for next year, that must be mandated by the 28th of February 2022. So the purpose of bringing this report to Cabinet is to have that consideration of the proposals contained within the report, and were it determined to go ahead as per the recommendation, then a short 6-week public consultation would be required, with a further report back to Cabinet with the results in time to achieve that timetable next spring. So as Councillor Cowan has already highlighted, in conducting this annual review, we have focused fundamentally on improving the customer experience and streamlining their journey in terms of claiming and accessing the support the Council provides to working age customers to help those who are either unable to work or who are in work but on a low income, and to help these people on that journey to fuller financial independence. So fundamentally, we've taken that two-pronged approach to utilise existing and forthcoming improvements in DWP and HMRC data share and software supplier enhancements that we are aware of and are working with our software supplier and the DWP and HMRC to further improve the customer experience and our back office processing. So we have identified 7 areas within this report with recommendation to proceed on just 4 of these topics. So if I may just briefly go into those areas, they are highlighted in the report. Members will be aware within option 1 that the council has a contribution rate of 8.5% to working age customers, meaning they have support up to 91.5% of their council tax. We have not recommended increasing their contribution rate, not least because of the current economic circumstances caused by the COVID pandemic and the impact that has on customers claiming council tax support, but also because, as detailed in Appendix 1, the actual return in terms of the cost borne by Breckland District Council as the billing authority is quite small and will impact on recovery for us against increased council tax rates. We're similarly within option 2, we have previously looked at restricting council tax to band D, meaning that people in band A, B, C and D will have support calculated to their band D council tax rate, but those above band D would have council tax calculated on band D. We have discounted that again because we think that administratively that might be difficult, and in the past members have taken the view that that isn't the approach they wish to proceed with. Option 3 looks at changing the capital threshold, which is currently set at £16,000, meaning that customers cannot have council tax benefit above £16,000. We are proposing in option 3 to reduce that capital limit to £10,000 and to abolish a so-called tariff income, where £1 is deducted for every block of £250 in a person assessment. And fundamentally, DWP do not share with us either a claim initiation or the monthly so-called RTI real-time information file that we have from DWP. They do not share capital with us, so we have to constantly engage with customers. They have a responsibility to notify to us every time their council reduces or increases their capital, increases or reduces by £250. We have to do a reassessment. It often causes overpayments and recovery of extra money and customer contact and complaints. And we think it makes sense to have a limit of £10,000 to reduce tariff income. And that would mean that were customers to fall below £10,000, they can reclaim for support at that point. It wouldn't be taken away completely. It would just be capped at £10,000. Option 5 is to introduce a standard non-dependent deduction rate for customers on passported benefit. And essentially by that, I mean people who are in work, not on a DWP benefit, primarily either income support, job seekers allowance or employment support allowance. And the problem here again is that DWP do not share that data with us. Quite often customers do not know the circumstances of an adult or a person who's a non-dependent within their family household or their home. And so therefore, again, that causes overpayments and difficulties for customers when they are late telling us and we have to go back and recalculate. So we think to have a standard non-deduction rate for those customers streamlines that process for the customer. And actually it also fulfills one of the government's major intentions with the local council tax support scheme, which is to incentivise work. So as that non-dependent earns more money, they will retain more of what they retain until such point as they become more independent. Option 6 is to streamline the claim process simply by having 3 categories of customer, and not too dissimilar to what we have now, but essentially tidied that up. So-called legacy customers are those that currently receive council tax support, but receive income support, job seekers allowance or employment support allowance, they would continue. People who need to claim universal credit primarily because they have had a change in circumstances, perhaps lost their job, unfortunately, need to claim universal credit, they would be in that category. I would sort of repoint to members that some years ago, we changed our scheme to utilise that data, that claim data that customer gives to DWP at the point of claiming, where they are signposted by the Department for Work and Pensions to contact the local authority, make a separate claim for council tax support. We're suggesting completely removing that requirement. We've taken that view now for some years, we simply take that data from DWP because it serves no purpose and inconvenient for customers to have to complete a separate claim form and to supply us data that we can securely take from DWP and simply make an assessment determination, award council tax support without no engagement at all from the customer. So we're proposing just to formalise that. And the third category would be in line with the council's armed forces covenant to protect people such as our widows and working age customers who unfortunately have had an impact from some military event. Who they have 100% as a mandate, the council, they give 100% support to people in that category. And finally, members may recall the details in the report how we introduced the initiative 2 years ago now, and it's worked very, very well to have a tolerance level because the DWP and HMRC send councils a monthly file from RTI when customers' earnings fluctuate. Employers have to declare that, as I'm sure you would know, every month to DWP and HMRC. That causes that fluctuation throughout the year. It's a further burden on the customers. We found that £65 per month has worked really well. We think by increasing that amount to £100 per month, £8 per week, will further reduce these customer contacts, these reassessments, the situation where we have to either give a refund the following month, it's back into arrears, it causes difficulties. And the report does highlight that we will continue with the safety net of helping a customer who has just one change in the year, which is beneficial. But the report does detail that, in fact, we've not had to do that within the past couple of years, that the scheme has worked quite well. So finally, were members to agree to those recommendations, the council would need to conduct a 6-week consultation, and we would work very closely with the council's communications team to facilitate that consultation, then bring a further report back to yourselves. So perhaps I should pause. There's quite a bit of information there to absorb. I'm very happy to take questions.
Lovely, thanks, Adrian. Phil, anything else to add? Thanks. Any questions or comments from colleagues? I've got Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much for your report. First, I'd just like to say that I welcome the changes that have been made in the sort of the capital threshold and some of the streamlining. That certainly seems to be a benefit for people, residents. We're still going through challenging times, and that's without even mentioning the current discussions around the 20% uplift, whether it's going to be retained or not. The only observation I would make, which won't surprise you, Chairman, is as in previous years, the official opposition, Labour opposition, always would hope that we could have a more than the 91.5% uplift to 100%. So we'll let that stand, that comment. But other than that, we welcome the progress that we have made so far and look forward to further improvements, and also any benefits we may get in terms of the new ministries and sharing information, which is obviously going to improve residents' lot, who are sometimes caught between two different agencies, and we're sometimes the piggy in the middle at ARP, as I know from casework. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. I've got Councillor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Adrian, for that presentation. I'm really pleased to support the recommendations. I was drawn to option 6, which is outlined in the report, paragraphs 511 to 513, which sets out the current and proposed process for claiming LCTRS. I know from anecdotally from surgeons, I'm sure colleagues, they find it similar. There are many that find completing official forms quite daunting, and particularly when we often ask them to duplicate the information provided. So a new streamlined process, which is simpler, allowing the quicker decisions and removing the duplication of forms with DWP ultimately makes it simpler and easier to access for the customer. And that is something to be applauded. So I'm fully in support.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions, comments at all? No, is it Adrian? Anything you want to come back on from Councillor Clark's comments?
No, thank you, Chair. Just to say that we will continue every year to maximise these opportunities to streamline the customer experience and to improve our assessment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for that presentation. If anything comes out of this report, it's two things. One is that we do everything we can possibly do to support our residents in as Councillor Robinson has pointed out, in a way that makes their life simpler and easier. But the other thing that I take from this is, and it's perhaps something, Leader, that the LGA District Council Network could deal with, and that's to try and encourage DWP to share more information directly with people like ARP, because all that does is create additional work, both for our officers and for residents alike. Whilst there is an awful lot of shared information, as Adrian has pointed out, there clearly is a lot more that can be done. And I think if that was to gather some sort of momentum in society, then we'd have a much better result all round for all our residents. And perhaps some of the comments that Councillor Clark has made, quite rightly so, would sort of fall off, really. So I would urge all our colleagues around the country to lobby government in order to enable DWP, who share our offices for heaven's sake, but just don't share the data, in order to streamline and make easier residents' applications, our understanding of their positions, for everyone's benefit. That said, Chairman, we have some, roll back to the page, some recommendations. Item 1, there are option 3, reducing the capital threshold to £10,000 and abolish the tariff income. Option 5 is introducing a fixed rate deduction of £7.40 for non-passported non-dependents. Option 6, streamlining the claim process. And option 7, increasing tolerance for universal credit data reassessments. And of course, all this will mean, as you've heard, that there will be a public consultation period, and this will be coming back to Cabinet in February, if that, to understand the result of that consultation and for us to take it forward into the next budget session. So with that in mind, I would like to move recommendations in paragraph 1, please, Chairman.
Lovely, thanks, Phil. Colleagues, all those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Those recommendations are moved. Thank you very much, Phil. So move on to item 9, which is the local plan review. I'll invite Councillor Paul Clausen to present, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As you stated earlier, we find ourselves yet again in a different position to the one that we thought we were in when this report was written. But, you know, as colleagues are aware that one of the most important roles we have as elected members is to take the best decision based on the best information we have available. And our continued journey through the local plan process is just that, a series of decisions based on the best information and commitment to doing the best for Breckland. Now, we were charged back in 2019 when we adopted the local plan by the inspector to carry out certain things. None of those we were able to do because the information wasn't available at the time. So in June 2020, this council decided to embark on a full review for the best reasons at that time. So we're back here today asking you now to seek approval to proceed with a single policy review of the local plan and the full review to continue. And we trust that that will ensure Breckland benefits from a quality local plan going forward. Chairman, if I might, I'll ask Andrew Holsworth now to present some slides, which hopefully will be simpler than what the report is.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. So yeah, we've prepared a few slides, conscious that Cabinet haven't had this discussion for a little while, and it is, as you mentioned, quite an involved topic that has a number of nuances, and we'll try and just sort of call out the key points. Obviously, there's considerable detail in the report in front of you, and we're here to answer any questions arising. But the key thing is that the context, as you set out, that the council embarked on a direction of travel in order to make sure that it maintains a robust local plan and all of the benefits thereof in 2019. There was sort of a pathway in front of us, which involved, but by necessity, reviewing issues to do with gypsies and travellers, accessibility. But unfortunately, circumstances did not fall in the council's favour, and a number of issues have conspired against that being possible. I won't go through them in a sort of absolute detail, but I think it's just worth referencing the diversity of challenges that we have faced, and some of the barriers that have prevented the council from following the path that it was originally intended to travel down back in 2019. So these include issues like the delays in publication of housing requirements, the ongoing delays with issues surrounding the A47, the awaiting definition of gypsy and travellers that was only out of the High Court back in July last year. And as we've heard today, and I no doubt we'll continue to hear, the additions we keep seeing in terms of new requirements on us as authorities, and this quite fluid at the moment policy environment. We've over this time already seen issues like first homes, but obviously the future of planning reform and planning policy remains a very live issue that we're having to be mindful of. The end result of this being that, with the benefit of hindsight now, the path that we set ourselves out on back in 2019 was not achievable through all of the information that's since become apparent. The challenge on us, therefore, is to continue to navigate the most effective way forwards that manages the priority of ensuring we have a robust local plan that's capable of supporting the council's aspirations, but also works in the context of the council's resource environment, and doesn't commit us to activity that will be at risk in the future. There are a myriad of policy options which we've attempted, well, we have consolidated in the paper for Cabinet today. And because of the complexity, there is sort of no absolute single path that we would have to follow. There are decisions that we should be making along the way in terms of what is the best fit for our aspirations and the best fit for the context around us. But making it as simple as possible, we could, in effect, carry out the review as initially set out. I think for the reasons we've outlined, that's not deemed a viable or sensible course of action. We could undertake a full review standalone, or we could undertake a review of the single policy element of this, which will effectively remove the requirement for that partial review to be completed by 2022, and alongside which will allow us to complete the more substantive review simultaneously. The paper calls out the sort of key pros, cons, and impacts around those. One of the important factors in this is obviously going to be resources, and members will know that the report in front sets out some quite significant commitments. One of the things we just wanted to sort of tease out from the paper is that the envelope for concluding a plan is roughly equivalent, irrespective of which option we go down. The challenge on us as officers is to make sure that the amount of duplicated costs and the risk of aborted work is kept to an absolute minimum. And there is an issue about how quickly we go and how that feeds into the overall price envelope. But the option that we're presenting and proposing today is effectively what we believe to be the most cost-effective solution within the resources available. The timeline that we're setting out today, which effectively follows that recommended proposal to conclude the single policy partial review as quickly and expeditiously as we possibly can, and whilst doing that alongside conduct a full review. So you'll see in the sort of map in front of you that early 23 we would intend to have the new partial review policy adopted, with work starting as soon as we can on the back of this decision for both that and the full review, with the intention that the full review would be able to be submitted for inspection towards the end of 2026. The key thing we just wanted to call out from the paper was, though, that we know fully that this will continue to be a somewhat fluid policy environment, and we will continue to reflect and adapt and be as pragmatic and agile as possible, particularly over this next period. That the trajectory that we're proposing will give us the ability to do that, and the ability to stand out with confidence to our development community, to our residents, and say this is our proposed approach. These are the key steps that we'll be taking, but it allows us the best degree of flexibility that we can should significant changes force us to change tack slightly. Whilst there is a lot of words behind this, and some considerable officer and member time has been spent on navigating a way forward over the last months and indeed years, and it's involved engagement with colleagues across the country to sort of chart the most effective solution. Just in very simple terms, we are required as a council to prepare a local plan. It is a statutory requirement upon us, but from our perspective, particularly in the context of economic development, particularly in the context of managing development and planning and growth as effectively as possible, it is more than a statutory requirement. It is one of the most important things that we can do to support the positive growth and positive development of the district. The recommendation in front of Cabinet today to go for that effective single policy review combined with the substantive review is intended to be the best fit in the context that we find ourselves in for the needs of the council, but also the council's resource base. We are here sort of in force if needed to answer any questions arising there. Thank you.
There we go. I'd just like to underline one thing that Andrew was saying there, that one of the things that we discussed and I've said to the team is that there will be no abortive work. We will make sure we are not wasting any money whatsoever along the way, because there was a time when nobody knew what was going to happen with the local plan. As you see before you there, local plans typically take 5 to 7 years to produce. The white paper said that we were going to produce one in 30 months. So clearly there was going to be some very, very different things. But as the chairman has told you earlier, we're now back on hold. So that's where we are. It's almost as if this paper was prepared knowing that, because it absolutely fits perfectly with the situation we now find ourselves in. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thanks, Paul. So questions or comments from colleagues at all? Councillor Atwell, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm surprised to know that I've got a few. First thing, and most importantly, coming out of this paper, and I think this is one I probably would like Simon Wood to answer if he can. Because of the dither and delay and the excuses for where we're at, whether that's government, whether it's this council, whatever, we find ourselves in a situation where our existing local plan policies will not hold weight, possibly for a period of up to 3 years before the new plan is adopted in 2027. So could Mr. Wood outline for everybody here today what that will mean for communities in terms of aggressive development applications coming their way, and in particular those communities that have an adopted neighbourhood plan? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Atwell. Before Simon comes in, could take him in threes if that's okay, if you've got a couple.
Okay, so the next one is for Councillor Clausen. This paper that you've put before us today, was that discussed and considered by the local plan working group? Is that me ringing? Possibly. Was that discussed by the local plan working group? And if so, when did that meeting convene and discuss this? So it had some oversight before it came to this committee today. And also in terms of the monetary situation, I'm slightly concerned that money is a consideration for sure, that we need to be diligent and we need to make sure we do this in a financial efficient way. But if we need to throw more resources at this to get this thing done sooner for our communities, what flexibility do we have in our budget to do that? Because I think the money is not the overriding issue here. It is to make sure that we have a robust adopted plan to protect our communities. Thank you.
Thanks. So I've got impact with Simon, working group with Councillor Clausen, and money with Andrew. We'll kick off with Simon, please, in that order.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the approach we've taken in getting to today has actually been quite a responsible approach. I don't think delaying delivery is probably quite the term that I would use. We've responded to circumstances that are largely outside of our control, and come forward with a solution that we think is responsible and pragmatic and will take us forward. In terms of the comments and the question Councillor Atwell made in relation to the weight of policies, the partial review is looking to push back the date when the local plan policies may be deemed to be out of date. So we're looking to safeguard the weight of the local plan and its function going forward. I think that policy is only one of a suite of things that contributes to decision making. The 5-year housing land supply, the housing delivery test, those are all matters that an inspector and us as a responsible council will take into account when making decisions on planning applications. So I think going forward, we should still be in a robust position for some years to make decisions based on the development plan.
Simple answer was no.
Yeah, sorry, with regard to the resources, so I think a few things to call out. So the allocation set out in this is considered to be generous, and it is considered to give the plan the best chance it can at being produced as effectively as possible. But the priority is to do that. We're also looking at ways that we can add weight to this through existing work that we're doing, whether that be the Future Breckland project, whether that be the additional research gathering and work we're doing across the county to make the necessary activity come forward, but perhaps not in the same way. But I guess as set out in the paper, we will continue to review what the resource allocation needs to be and make sure that it's fit for the purpose that it's required to be.
Thank you. Just before I bring you back in, Councillor Aswell, anybody else, any other questions? Councillor Mawson, please.
Thank you, Leader. I've got 3 questions as well, if I can go through them. I think during this period, the government has been clear that we should have been carrying on looking at local plans and neighbourhood plans. And we're now asking to push back, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the info 3 by 2 years or even longer. How are we going to demonstrate that we've made best efforts to justify that delay? The second one is really about the budget shortfall of 600,000. I'm rather surprised that, given that we know this work has to be done, that there's such a big shortfall. Perhaps you could explain how it is such a big figure. And finally, my biggest concern really is that we've had 2 years since declaring a climate emergency, and the local plan is probably the best way we have of implementing policies. There's very little discussion in here. There is a reference, but nothing concrete.
Thanks. So I've got demonstrate Paul, if you can pick that up, budget with Andrew again, and then climate and environmental policies with Paul, and then Simon, please.
Question why the delay, I believe, Chairman. I don't believe that there has been delay. I think what's happened is there has been an ever constant changing environment within which we've been working. And we have taken decisions in a timely fashion throughout that process. As I said earlier, we were making the best decisions based on the best information at the time, which was coming from our officers.
Andrew, budget again.
Thank you. So I think that the key thing to call out on the budget point is that there has been and remains an allocation for local plan within the council's budget, but we always knew that there would be a need to reflect on that based on the specific needs of the review coming forwards, which is effectively what we're setting out to do now. This sets out the envelope that's required, and it will be resolved through the council's budget process moving forward.
And back on the environment, if you look closely at this, there's a technical paper, and you will see nothing in there, not nothing, very little in there, which I would call being Brecklandized. So all of that will be coming back as part of the further process. This is a technical paper to get us into the right position at this moment in time.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else with any other questions or comments? No. Councillor Wilkinson, then back to Councillor Attwell, please.
Thank you, Leader. It's not a question, but Councillor Clausen has just pointed out it is a technical paper. It has to go to the inspectorate. It's included with respect to the authors. They have included in this paper what has gone before, public consultation, members' input, and obviously we anticipate the resources we have to complete the projects as and when they come forward. It's been delayed by government with the white paper still not come out. It's still expected. And at the moment as well, the timetable is based on our existing planning system. So as a district at this point, I don't think we will be affected.
Thanks, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Attwell, please.
Just like to come back on 2 points, if I may. Mr. Wood, if I can again, please, with regard to the weight that our existing policies will have, you've referred to the partial review, which, if I read the paper correctly, we're hoping to have that in place by 2023, 2024. So there will be a gap between, say, 2024 and 2027 when you're proposing to have the new local plan reviewed and adopted. So again, what happened? Can you say to me now that all of our existing policies, assuming you get the partial review done, and looking at the paper, there's a moderate risk that that may fail. That's what's written in the paper. But let's assume that goes through. Are you saying to this committee here today that those existing policies that we have will still hold the weight that they do today up until 2027? Would you like me to ask the second question? So the second one is for Councillor Clausen. Why didn't you feel it necessary to consult with the working group? Bearing in mind that's an all Conservative working group, your choice. I would have thought that would have been the diligent thing to do to get input from members, because I have to pick up on what Councillor Wilkinson just said. There hasn't been any member input. There hasn't been any member input into this paper. Nobody was consulted on this. No members were asked about it. The first anybody knew about it was when it was published last week with the committee papers. I think that's a little bit arrogant, to be honest. And I'd like to know why that working group wasn't consulted. Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't definitively sit here today and say what weight will be given to the policies going forward in relation to the local plan. That will be a matter that will be addressed by the circumstances of each different application and the policies and the national policy context at the time. So it's not a commitment I can give, Chairman.
Thanks, and then back to Councillor Clowes, and we'll try and move this on.
Yes, Chairman, that's quite a compliment. I can handle being arrogant. No problem with that at all. So what we have is officers coming, wanting a decision, wanting this paper to come to this cabinet meeting. There was only just enough time to get it through the process. So I had to take the decision which an executive member is allowed to take, and many councils have only the executive member as an oversight. So the rest of what you're saying is your own personal feelings. It doesn't have to be thus. Thank you.
So I've got Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Cowan, please.
Thank you, Leader. Can I just clarify my point? My point was this is a technical paper. There would have been no point in consulting members on this because it is technical and it needed to go to the inspector. He demanded it. My point was the content of this paper contains information from public consultation and member input, which we had out there back in, was it 2017, 2016, 2017, 2018. So that's my point, that members' input and the public input has been identified in this paper.
Thank you, Leader. As you said, it's probably about time we brought this debate to a conclusion. But I think in order to do that, we really just need to remind ourselves why this paper was brought forward in the first place. We adopted a local plan in 2019 and the inspector said, yeah, okay, it's pretty good, but you've got one or two things that you need to deal with and you've got until November 22 in order to deal with those. In the meantime, one of those fundamental questions that he had asked of us, we couldn't answer because it was a High Court decision. So that delayed matters. Yes, we could have done all the other things and then wasted a lot of money and gone back over it again. And holding on to the purse strings in this council, I'm not very keen that we waste money and we undertake abortive work. So I was very happy that we delayed doing things until we knew exactly what we needed to do. We found that out in July of this year. Just remember that, July of this year. We did not stop doing things. We carried on with a local plan, which the inspector said was sound, except for you need to review things. We then made a decision looking at, for instance, climate change and environmental matters that said, if we want to really make a difference in Breckland from that perspective, our local plan needs a fundamental refresh, because without that, we're going to struggle to hold on to some of these very dear policies that everyone in this council wants us to pursue. And that's why we took that decision. In the meantime, we get the government throwing a white paper at us. Furthermore, that white paper is now, as we've heard, a little bit out in the wind. There's going to be consultation in Westminster amongst MPs. And I read the other day that in fact the housing delivery test is also going to be adjusted, which may in itself have a fundamental impact on some of the stuff we might already have done, which would have been a waste of time, cost us money, and we have to start again. We also need to remember, of course, that local plans have to be reviewed anyway on a regular basis. So even if our local plan in 2019 was found to be absolutely 100% sound, we would be undertaking a new review around about 2024, 2025 in any case. And all this paper is doing is setting out the background to why decisions have had to be taken of a technical nature. It doesn't deal with any policies. Members have an influence on policies. This is a technical paper setting out a process to ensure, as far as our officers are concerned, that we, as a planning authority, are not going to fall foul of the inspectors if and when applicants make appeals. That's exactly what this paper set out to do. And it's setting it out in a time frame, which I stress may now need to change, because government still hasn't come down and explained what they need us to do as a planning authority. As far as budgets are concerned, it's our best estimate at the moment this paper was written. And whatever government tells us could well have a fundamental impact on those budgets. But as Andrew has already said, and I'm sure Rob would agree, budgets looking ahead, and we're looking ahead here to 2028, have a habit of changing. They have a habit of changing for various reasons. And again, with my finance hat on, I am not dismayed to see that potential, and I stress the word potential overspend, based on the predictions around which we now know may be uncertain. This is a technical paper which gets our officers to a position where we can then start to move forward with some degree of certainty, and I stress some degree of certainty, because of the nature of the landscape of planning, which may catch us out in the next few months. So, Chairman, I can only endorse and support the report that's been written. It's incredibly technical. There are pages and pages and pages of facts and figures. And I think as executive members, we need to support our officers who've taken a lot of time and trouble in putting this report together, to put this council and the residents of this district in a place where hopefully everything with a fair wind will enable us to support them, protect the environment, and deliver a local plan which will stand the test should an inspector have a look at it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Cowan. You summarised comments, the officer's position and Paul's previous statement immensely well. You've saved me the trouble of doing that for you. And I think that your closing position, that this is a very clear intent to our community, those who wish to live in Breckland, invest in Breckland, and of course protecting democracy at every step of the way. And your timeframe you laid out from back to December 2019 to that November 2022 review, and that requirement to have a full review every 5 years for an adopted plan anyway. I think this council has made a very strategic decision to twin track both a partial and a full review, and I think it will serve our communities well. And we will continue to look at the national landscape to make sure that we're keeping pace with government. And of course, if you look to some of our neighbouring authorities in the east of England who still haven't got a local plan adopted, and their officers and their planning committee are constantly struggling with those aggressive developers who are holding their toes to the fire. And this council is in a very strong position and will continue to be as long as we stay agile and adaptable to what's happening around us. Paul, are you happy to move the recommendations, please?
Yes, but before I do that, Chairman, I'd just like to come back to Councillor Attawell. He's the only councillor in my entire time here that makes personal comments. And I would just like to say that what Margaret Thatcher said, that is when you get personal, it tends to show you've lost the policy argument. Anyway, Chairman, I'll move straight on. That we are moving these recommendations that a single policy partial review of policy INF 03 is prepared in parallel with a substantive review of the whole local plan as outlined in section 4 of the report. 2, that timetables for both the single policy partial and substantive reviews are approved as set out in the revised local development scheme. 3, that further work is undertaken and continued challenge and monitoring to agree the ongoing financial resource required for the preparation of the single policy partial and substantive reviews of the plan. 4, that the statement of community involvement is approved for public consultation for a period of 6 weeks. I move the recommendations, Chairman.
Lovely. For Cabinet colleagues, you've got the 4 recommendations presented there. All those in favour? That's a unanimous decision. Thank you very much for that. So we'll move on to item 10 then, which is the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance strategy. Councillor Bambridge would be presenting this item today, but he's in fact at County Hall at the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance board meeting, which is taking place face to face. So he has given his apologies today. I've accepted his apologies, and Rob Walker, Director, will present in his absence. So Rob, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So members will remember and be aware that the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance was formed earlier in 2021 under the chairmanship of Lord Dant. It's had several meetings during that course, and we've been an active participant in those meetings. The principal aim of that alliance is to bring more coherence and more strategic and joined-up approach to how we manage both coastal and sort of fluvial flooding as it becomes more prevalent across the county. Within the appendices to the report, there's an outline framework and strategy which sort of sets out the approach that's required of the Flood Alliance. A couple of things to signal are the move to one number. I think that's a recognition that when residents and people across Norfolk are in a flood risk situation, actually the complexity of which authority or which public agency to ring at that time can be confusing. So I think the benefit of a single number approach can reap important dividends when communities are responding to flooding situations. Further to that, a number of sites were identified right across the county. I think there were 16 in total, which were identified as areas focused and multi-agency intervention at the outset. So of those 16, 6 were in Breckland, and were areas that ward members will know and be familiar with who've experienced flooding type situations over recent years. Those being Watton and Saintony, Cranworth, Yaxham, Matshall, Necton and Kenninghall. I'd just like to point out, so clearly 6 of 16 is a pretty good representation for our area, but also that is the first tranche of sites. I know there are other sites within Breckland that have and are at risk of flooding in the future, and we intend to try and get those in future tranches of activity to be focused on. So, Chairman, I ask Cabinet whether they'll endorse the strategy as part of the ongoing work of the Flooding Alliance.
Lovely, thank you, Rob. Questions or comments from colleagues, please. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you, Rob, for the presentation. I've got a small number of questions. I'll try and keep it as brief and succinct as possible, which may be a unique event for me. As some members may know and colleagues, I've actually taken quite a bit of interest in flooding, not just in Breckland, but across the county. And you can commiserate or congratulate with me, but I've actually read, and I don't want to medal for it, I've read every document that's come out over the last 11 years, both on surface water management plans, the stuff around the Alliance and so forth. So I know a bit about the background, but I won't bore you with that. First question to possibly to the Leader is, thank you very much for this update. And I'm sorry, Councillor Bambridge doesn't hesitate more detailed questions. Are you anticipating this going as a paper to full council? That's my first question. I'll give you the other questions and you can come back to me for ease of reference. One of the key points that you put in there is, in terms of measures of success, is that that will be judged by, and I quote, a higher level of confidence amongst residents, i.e. actions by organisations like ourselves, though the NCC is the lead flood authority, to reduce fear of flooding and drought, and obviously not just the fear of it, but the actual flooding. In terms of some of the details in the paper, there's a mention there of the flyer and the communications stuff that's gone out. I've already received the flyer, so I guess that I'm at risk. Not everyone's got this and talks about the flood line, so that's a start. In terms of the 2 tranches, obviously some of those tranches have been identified as a result of more recent flooding events, such as those in Yaxham, which I'm well familiar with, as will Councillor Clausen, particularly involving Anglian Water. And also there's been a very active group, thankfully, in Watton, which is expertly led and has local engagement. In terms of many of the flood risks, looking at the flood map, a lot of those flood risks are already known. I will be hoping that in tranche 2, areas which have already been known don't get overlooked, because in the Dereham area, we have the highest number of properties at risk. That's whether that's ground level, surface water, management issues, compared with Kings Lynn and Great Yarmouth. So we're about 3rd in that list in terms of the number of properties. So my first question is about the council. The second one, the questions around the second tranche, some of those areas which we don't want to get misplaced, because if residents read that, they may think, well, what's happening around that? The question around both the flyer is also around the communication. I have prompted our 2 local county councils about this at Dereham Town Council, asking about what further engagement is going to be with residents other than the flyer, people who are at risk. And leading on from that, another question is the there's no mention there, I don't think, of the resources for the flood team, which I know have been sort of bid for and agreed by NCC Cabinet. Last question is there. I know that where we can't have proper measures to protect houses and there isn't sufficient mitigation, I know a number of properties have been identified in the Dereham area principally, particularly in tranche 2, that may be at risk that we can't protect, and they can have grants of up to £5,000. And I wondered if there's been any information in terms of both the uptake of those grants and applications, and also whether any of those properties where they are at risk have actually been communicated with directly, other than sort of a flyer through the door. I know it is complex, and I would welcome obviously a further discussion outside the meeting with Rob, as I'm sure other members would, but also if there's possibly opportunity for a fuller discussion at the full council. And I'm sure all members are behind the leader and our other representative, I think is Maxine, if it's not Rob, at the Alliance. Thank you, Leader.
Lovely, thanks, Councillor Clark. I'll try and move through those questions. So first of all, the paper presented today is a cabinet decision for us to sign off on, and obviously these minutes will be presented in the full council agenda pack. Any member of the council is entitled to come today to speak, such as yourself. So no, it won't be going any further today. It's an executive endorsement that we will be supporting the Flood Alliance moving forward. Councillor Bambridge will be delighted to talk to you and any other members of this council or communities around their concerns and issues. And as Mr. Walker presented earlier, these are the first start of that list, and actually it's a very targeted approach, and I think that is all about managing expectations in our community. There's nothing more frustrating than saying that we're going to do something for our communities and it's a protracted long wait for any action. So this is a very clear intent at a strategic level that we've signed up to 6, was it earlier? 6 out of the 16 sites, all within the Breckland locality, and that will then move into the tactical response to how we can deal with those at a granular level within those localities, ensuring that all those individuals who sign up to the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance are doing what they need to do. And you highlighted an issue around Anglian Water and the concerns in Yaxham, particularly as a operational position for Anglian Water. Our intent within the document is quite clear. That actually, as you are aware, that at a tactical level, the council has responded to those communities impacted by flooding, whether that's through street scenes, sandbags, or emergency accommodation if required. And we will continue to always do that. And if you have any feedback or anything beyond that, please do make sure you feed that into Maxine O'Mahony or Rob Walker, so that we're continuously evolving our response to our localities. In relation to grants, I'm not aware of them, so I'll be grateful if you could send that to Councillor Bambridge and myself, so that we can look into that and make sure we're advertising that fully. And the final piece on communication, I will continue to communicate to members as I have, and as I said I would do, all the readout from the Flood Alliance board meetings. Of course, the agenda packs are viewable on Norfolk's county website. Every household across the county has received the flyer with the one number on. It is a useful document. I don't live in a flood risk area, thankfully, but it's still pinned to my fridge with a magnet. So I've got that ability to access that number, and the number's on my phone for any residents who do ring me if they have any concerns around flooding. I think in quick order, through the pandemic, we've been able to stand up a body which we haven't been able to achieve in Norfolk and the rest of the country. This body has now got the right people around the table to make a difference to our communities. I think that is a positive position. As the district council, we will continue to do what we are statutorily responsible for, but we will go above and beyond if our partners ask us to do so, confined to budget and resource, but that's a political decision for us to make as and when those requests are forthcoming.
Just a brief come back to that, Leader. Yes, thank you very much for that. The £5,000 figure was actually from the Norfolk County Council website, and hopefully that information is up to date. The other, I'm sure you are doing your best that the Alliance is standing up for all Breckland residents. My plea was partly geared, I suppose, at some of those communities which may not be as loudly represented or as expertly led as they are by the people in Watton, particularly through Liz Witcher. So it's important that some of those areas aren't overlooked. I'm aware of those in my own area, particularly in the Durham North and South County divisions, because I've actually walked up and down every single area that's identified on the flood map, as can be vouched by both residents and also the Eastern Daily Press representatives. Thank you, Leader.
And I would say, Councillor Clark, that via me, when I've been attending, and now Councillor Banbridge, we have absolutely raised those local issues. And I think that's replicated in the fact that we've got such a large number on that initial listings of priorities across the whole of the county. And more importantly, of course, it's not just us. I know that the County Council, via the leader who sits on that body with the head of paid service, is absolutely focused on that. And I know that the chairman of NAUC bangs that drum immensely loudly for his hundreds of parishes across the county and disseminates weekly notifications to his members about the activity and NAUC are undertaking and how their parish councils can engage positively to ensure that any local issues are heard. And for example, I know that Lord Dannatt is today visiting one of our parishes in Breckland to understand what occurred to them over the Christmas period and what actions have been taken by strategic partners to respond to that, and how we can mitigate that in the future. I think that's a really positive piece that Lord Dannatt and his team are visiting Breckland to understand what's happening locally. If there are no other questions then in relation to that item, there is a recommendation on page 100 that we note the contents of the report and the appendix. Colleagues, and endorse the strategy. Thank you, Rob. I forgot that word. Yep, lovely. Show of hands there. Thank you very much indeed. So we've only got 2 items to go. So we'll move on to item 12 then, which is... Sorry, I've ticked the wrong box again. Getting too excited. We've got 3 more items to go. We're now at item 11, which is the Q1 Financial Performance Report 21-22. Councillor Cowan, please.
I thought you'd let me get away with that one. Thank you, Chairman. Q1 financial performance. We're familiar with these quarterly performance reports. At the start of the year, they're a little bit like a crystal ball. At the end of the year, it's a lot more precise. And in essence, that's exactly where we are with any Q1 financial report. It is early days. It is up to the end of June. And it does, as you might imagine, project an overspend. But if we review what's happened in history, that overspend gets reduced as the year moves on for various reasons. The good news in this particular report, it identifies that of the efficiencies that we're required to make, 49% have already been achieved. So that in itself, at Q1, to achieve just under half, literally just under half of the efficiencies, is a very sound position in which we find ourselves. There are, however, as you will see from the appendices, some overspends and underspends. And the overspends relate to particularly items over which we had little control as a result of the pandemic in terms of housing need and so on. And the underspends, of course, of a similar nature, because projects which were planned to go forward are actually delayed for various reasons. And in terms of the financial treasury report, you'll notice that some of the income that we anticipated receiving hasn't come in, and that's largely because Breckland Bridge have had to slow down, but that income will come back to us in terms of our overall financial performance. So in summary, we are in I believe, a robust position at the end of Q1. There are some concerns, but those concerns are being mitigated and managed. We do have some carry forwards, which I generally don't like, but we can't avoid those. And these are largely all funded externally. So the projects in Thetford, the projects in Snetterton are those which are being carried forward. On that basis, this is a report which is to be noted. It is a statement as of the 30th of June. And I would conclude at that point, Chair.
Lovely, thanks, Phil. So this is just for note of the Cabinet colleagues, but I'm content to take any questions or comments from anybody. No, there are none. So Cabinet colleagues, content to note. Thank you very much indeed. We'll now move on to item 12, the Constitution Contract Procedure Rules, with Councillor Sarah Suggett to present, please.
Thanks, Chair. From time to time, it's necessary to review the Constitution in light of decisions made and ensure we're compliant with audit requirements. This report sets out the proposed amendments given regard to the log of delegations and proposed amendments to the contract procedure rules. These proposed amendments largely cover the end of the shared working arrangement with South Holland, the UK's departure from the EU, and updating the delegation with regards to the numbering order changing on the rules. Governance and Audit heard this report in July, where no issues were reported, and it was felt very sensible to bring the Constitution in line and reflect where and how the contract procedure works. I'd like to ask Cabinet colleagues to support the recommendation to full council on page 108. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anton, anything you want to expand upon? No, thank you. So this is for Cabinet colleagues to note recommendations, to agree to recommendations 1 and 2, and then to recommend 3 to full council for Appendix B of the contract procedures as inserted after the financial management standards. Any questions from colleagues? Councillor Kyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. When this went through governance and audit, I thought we were going to have an appendix of the revised constitution, or will that be what is presented to council rather than have all these strike throughs, the new document that is the updated constitution?
Pass, I don't know. I looked at Anton Ball for that clarification.
I think Democratic colleagues may answer this better than me, but my understanding is it's presented to council in exactly the same way so that the changes can be seen, and then once it's approved, it's the clean version that then becomes part of the constitution.
Thank you. Did you? Yep. Thank you. No other questions or comments then? Happy with the recommendation, Sarah?
Yes, please.
Thank you. All those in favour? Good, that's unanimous. So we'll move on to item 13 then, which is the Thetford Town Centre Thriving Places programme and the Maharaja Ranjit and Julip Singh Park. Councillor Paul Clowes to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thriving Places is one of the key priorities under our corporate plan. A simple commitment to do everything we can to ensure the places people live, work and visit in Breckland are thriving, vibrant and capable of meeting the challenges and the opportunities of the future. The report before you today provides a snapshot of this programme in Thetford, with a retrospective and a future-facing look at some of the activity in the town. As we continue to expand our programme and investment pipeline, I look forward to many more reports coming forward in future months around other parts of the district. For today, however, with a focus on Thetford, I'm delighted to report that our largest market town has benefited from some significant additions recently, both from the council's direct intervention and from the wider positive support of the market. MTI monies have invested almost £70,000 in important new public facilities in and around the town centre, including new heritage footway lighting, columns on Spring Walk, columns on Button Island, and recreational street furniture, including chess and table tennis tables for public use. Almost £40,000 has been invested in river cleansing activity, and we have been able to remove the disused riverboat cafe, which had fallen into disrepair and become an eyesore. Unsurprisingly, the private sector is investing heavily as well, with refurbishment of the old M&Co site now underway and set to welcome a new generation of local independent retailers when complete. And the Riverside complex is now fully let. But there is much more to be done and much more planned in the programme. Almost 20 million funding bids here are pipelined for Thetford to help secure major investments in transport, employment, space and public realm. The Thetford Place branding project is due to conclude by the end of the year, and the Thetford phase of Future Breckland project is due to commence next January. And for today specifically, we have a further enhancement proposed to seek Cabinet support to approve the renaming of Button Island in Thetford to Maharaja Ranjit and Julip Singh Park in recognition of the important cultural and historical connections in Thetford. Thetford has a close and highly significant connection to Julip Singh and the last Maharaja of the Punjab and the first Sikh to settle in Britain, in Norfolk, in 1854. Julip Singh's second son, Frederick, was one of Thetford's most prominent benefactors, giving the ancient townhouse as well as its personal collections. This connection continues today, with Thetford remaining a prominent cultural site for the British Punjabi community and for Punjabi visitors from overseas. Situated by the Little Ouse River, Button Island is the largest of the river islands within Thetford town centre and offers an accessible and usable leisure and recreational area for local communities and visitors. It is also home to a life-size bronze statue of Maharaja Dulip Singh, which was commissioned by the Maharaja Dulip Singh Centenary Trust and unveiled by the Prince of Wales in 1999. This was the first major piece of Sikh public art outside India. The statue is seen to symbolize bringing together history and culture. This simple name change is a strong example of how we are looking to innovate and work with our assets and partners to create value and opportunity. We believe it will have a real positive impact, continuing to put Thetford on the map and connecting its wonderfully diverse history to an equally diverse future. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thanks, Paul. I've got questions or comments from Councillor James, Councillor Brame and Councillor Robinson, and then Councillor Kyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, thank you so much for the support that has been provided to myself and my fellow ward member in Thetford. The opportunity to enhance the areas on Spring Walk and Button Island have reaped dividends and continue to do so, and they are used on the whole in a positive manner. The proposal today to rename Button Island to the Maharaja Ranjit and Dulip Singh Park is very welcome and represents another significant opportunity for Thetford to acknowledge and engage with part of its cultural heritage. The statue of the Maharaja on Button Island and the Ancient House Museum, gifted by Prince Frederick, son of Dulip Singh, have long been of considerable interest to the Sikh community and have drawn visitors from across the country and even internationally. It's really important that we understand that this renaming is not an isolated gesture, but works in conjunction with the ongoing efforts by Thetford Town Council to celebrate and share this element of our heritage, as most recently seen by the support provided on Heritage Open Days, to the events on the marketplace, and the development of a complimentary display in the newly refurbished Guildhall. It also builds further on the well-received Festival of Thetford and Punjab in 2018, which marked the 125th anniversary of the death of Dulip Singh, which also brought considerable numbers of visitors to the town, a wide variety of experiences and events, and sowed those essential seeds of the collaborative working with organisations such as the Essex Cultural Diversity Project, the Sikh Museum Initiative, alongside more established links with advocates of Sikh and Punjabi history. And Thetford today is in a stronger position to share this heritage. This proposed renaming is a fitting tribute to a family that has given much to the town of Thetford and continues to do so. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Councillor James. Chairman of the Council.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't think I was going to get to say that this year. I've come today really to speak on behalf of the Sikh community. That they've asked me if I would come here. One of the things that this is a little bit misleading. The Sikh community do not want to rename Button Island. What they would really prefer is to be allowed to call it the Park of Ranjit and Dulip Singh on Button Island. It is something that they don't want to take away anything from the town. They believe that this is a merger between the Sikh cultures, our cultures. We have an ideal position within Button Island where rivers meet. It is really quite a position that they feel will bring everything together. They want to use Thetford as a tourist attraction for their own community. They are very concerned that there is a 6-month consultation that goes public so that they and the people of Thetford can have on the island the things that are needed and what they are trying to do. One of the reasons for the naming of the park is that within their culture, they really want to get involved. They have set up fundraising. There's all sorts of things that they want to be involved in our town and promote Thetford as a place where Sikhs internationally, Punjab people internationally will come because they don't know their own history. It's, we in Thetford know about Julep Singh, most of the Punjab doesn't. And they want it to become a place to enlighten their own people, our people, and to really become a community together. A small side effect of that will be lots of people coming to our high street. When this last Sunday passed, we had nearly 400 people there from Coventry, Leicester, and all over the place. And they came up to me on many occasions and said, "What a wonderful town you have." I was delighted that they told me how clean it was, which is something that we have been trying to do for some time. They looked upon it as a real gem, and they all said they would be coming back. So I ask you to sort of carry on with this and to do this, and I'm fully prepared to support the proposal. But it really is, as far as the Sikh community is concerned, the park on Button Island. It is the whole thing is trying to mix and join and collaborate with each other. So, not rename, just name the park on Button Island, please.
Lovely, thank you, Chairman. I'll go to Councillor Robinson, then Councillor Kyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Bit of a theme here, but as they're all aware, there have been close ties between Thetford and the Sikh community since 1863. Before anyone else, I wasn't there, although I may look like it. The Maharaja Julep Singh, he purchased the country estate at Elvin, where he raised his 8 children, and the town and the wider area benefited from this, and not least the gifts bequeathed by the Maharaja's son Frederick. Some of you will know I'm a history buff. I'll also remind you of one of his other children, Sophia Singh, who was a renowned suffragette and an advocate right up until the 1930s for women's rights. The links between Thetford and the Sikh community are both deep and strong. And Julep and Frederick Singh are an important part of the town's social history. And it's only fitting that we celebrate Julep Singh, the last Maharaja of Punjab, and he's recognised. And we look to celebrate that cultural legacy, which is both local and international. Dedicating a public space where his statue proudly stands is a worthy way to do so. And as Councillor Clausen outlined, given its location, it ties in strategically with MTI projects that have been delivered. Council's work with the MOA design, all highlighting the importance of the river corridor to reinvigorating the town centre. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just echoing what Mark said, that Julep Singh arrived in England in the midsummer of 1854, but I don't think he came to Norfolk until viewing Elverden Hall, which he bought in October 1863 for the princely sum of £105,000, which he borrowed at 4% from the India Office. In early 1864, he left England and went to Cairo, where he met his future wife, and he moved back into Elverden in October 1864, having commissioned various building works. So at that point, both Elverden and the south of the river in Thetford was in Suffolk, and Button Island was specifically chosen to be on the Norfolk-Suffolk as an appropriate place for the statue on the Norfolk-Suffolk border to reinforce the links with Suffolk from Elverden and the links with Norfolk for the particularly the two prince sons. I think I would go along with what the chairman of the council has said, that this should be to Ranjit and Dulip Singh Park on Button Island. I've not been able to establish why it's called Button Island. It wasn't called Button Island on the 1837 map, and there is nothing in the Norfolk Historic Environment record that gives further enlightenment. But I think as part of this process, an information board setting out the history of Button Island might also be useful. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carbon, who every day is a learning day. I think the last time I had a history lesson was many moons ago. I'll bring Councillor Wilkinson in shortly. I understand from my conversation with the History Society that actually it was some indecipherable spelling of Button Island, and it then effectively became referred to as Button Island, but was initially referred to as Butler's Island, and then the spelling became a little bit untenable to read. So, but that's a History Society. Now, I may have got that wrong. I was with Councillor James when that was briefed to me. I just want to expand on, we're very much focused on the renaming of the Maharaja Ranjit and Dulip Singh Park, and that's a really important part to play. And I think councillors today have highlighted that cultural link, which is really important for our community. And I think one of the reasons why this is forthcoming from Councillor Clausen today to Breckland is to once again reaffirm our commitment to our market towns and our hinterlands, that we want to ensure that Breckland is a place where residents and businesses can thrive. And those dear members, I know that Councillor Clark and Councillor Morton and Webb are present today. We're really pleased to see that investment we've made in the Pocket Park in Dereham, and of course that future Breckland work which we've undertaken. And as much as that's very much focused on those direct communities in that market town currently, I know that the hinterlands supporting Councillor Clausen's area, Councillor Attewell's area, are in that second phase of that future Breckland's work. And it's ensuring that this council has a very clear position as to where it wants to see its communities going. And as Councillor Clausen said earlier, this is just one report, and we're really hopeful that we'll see many more forthcoming to focus on other parts of the district to once again highlight the work we've undertaken. And MTI, Market Town Initiative money, some £750,000 is councillors committed to allow local members to decide where that is spent in consultation with a cabinet member. And Thetford has seen that today. I know that Councillor James and the chairman of the council lobbied immensely hard for improvements to Footway Light and its Spring Walk and Button Island, future street furniture. And that's just one scheme which you shaped and led that. And then of course, the secondary piece we've heard in the report today about us doing that direct investment to ensure that regeneration and reinvestment in our town centre by removing that eyesore, which we were able to do through direct intervention. We can't do that across every one of our market towns. This was a unique opportunity. So as much as I'm more than happy to focus on that one part around the renaming, I know that Councillor Clausen has just whispered in my shell like to make an amendment to that recommendation, which I'm happy to support. So just for clarity for cabinet members and members of council, recommendation item 1 stands, but item 2 will be adjusted for Dem's purposes to approve the renaming of Button Island in Thetford to the Maharaja Ranjit and Dulip Singh Park on Button Island. So absolutely link it into that piece of Button Island, but that it support working in partnership with the Maharaja and Ranjit community across and Punjab community across not just the United Kingdom, but the wider world as well, which I know that it's a destination of choice for lots of individuals. I saw Councillor Wilkinson's hand up before I went on a bit of a diatribe then. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, as you know, I'm a history buff, and as you know, I've got a degree in history, and you've answered all my questions, really. I think renaming the park is fantastic. I think that's going to have tourists asking more questions, which is great. And I'd just like to say, as you said, you mentioned all the other market towns. Don't forget the other market towns, of course. And are you listening? Yeah, and in the and in the north of the district, you know, we have little old Swaffham, who is famous for Howard Carter, who found the King Tut's tomb. So we've got something to build on there as well. Thank you.
And of course, through our Heritage Action Zone funding, we've got in Swaffham hundreds of thousands of pounds, once again, working in partnership across not just the county, the district, the parish, town council in Swaffham, but those other individuals within that community to ensure that Swaffham is a community in which residents and businesses can thrive. And I know that the town council and the local district and the county members are working hard to get that money spent at pace. But of course, as we've heard today, there have been some delays in many programmes of activities for a wealth of reasons, and Swaffham is now rocketing in fifth gear. Councillor Clausen, do you want to move the recommendations?
Yes. Recommendations, including the amendment.
Thanks. So for clarity, the recommendations have been moved with that amendment to recommendation 2. Our cabinet colleagues all in approval. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So that brings us on. Sorry, Councillor Brain, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. May I just say thank you very much to the cabinet. It's a great thing that's going to happen. Unfortunately, there is another side effect. I could be on television across the Punjab and various other places this afternoon. As this has gone through, I will now be getting in touch with them, and for some reason they would like me to appear on television, which again is going to promote Thetford internationally, and they really have got some big ideas of how this is going to make Thetford an international destination. So I thank you once again.
Great, and I'm sure that the EDP report at the back would love a quote from the local ward members of Councillor James and Councillor Brain, the chairman of the council, and I'm sure that the chairman is aware of the possible 5-day call-in for any cabinet decisions. So let's not get too excited just yet, but I'm hopeful that all of the Thetford district members are supportive of the recommendations we've had today. So we'll move on to the final item, which is item 14. So the date of the next meeting is proposed for Monday, the 15th of November at 9:30 here in the Anglia Room at Elizabeth House. And I now formally close the meeting at 11:13. Thank you very much indeed.